The wedding bells echoed through St. Augustine's Cathedral on a crisp October morning, their sound carrying across the small town like a promise that would never be fulfilled. Emma Lawson stood at the altar in a borrowed dress, clutching white roses that had begun to wilt in her trembling hands. 23 guests shifted uncomfortably in the wooden pews, their whispers growing louder with each passing minute. The groom was late, very late. Emma's 5-year-old daughter, Lily, sat in the front row, swinging her legs beneath a flower girl dress that had cost more than Emma could afford. The child hummed softly, oblivious to the tension crackling through the sacred space like electricity before a storm. Emma's sister, Rebecca, placed a warm hand on her shoulder, but Emma barely felt it. Her entire world had narrowed to the empty space beside her, where Michael Harrison should have been standing. The priest cleared his throat for the third time, his expression a mixture of pity and professional concern. Emma had known Father Matthew since childhood. He had baptized her, confirmed her, and now he stood witness to what was rapidly becoming the most humiliating moment of her life. "Traffic?" Emma whispered, though the excuse sounded hollow even to her own ears. "He'll be here." But she knew. Deep in the part of herself she had been trying to ignore all morning, she knew Michael wasn't coming. The text message she had received an hour earlier burned in her memory. She had read only the first few words before shoving her phone into Rebecca's hands, too afraid to see the rest. The fragments she had glimpsed were enough. "Can't do this. Too much responsibility. Sorry." Responsibility. That single word cut deeper than any insult could have. Michael wasn't referring to the marriage itself, or to the life they had planned together. He meant Lily. Her beautiful, innocent daughter had become a burden too heavy for him to carry. For 8 months, Michael had played the role of devoted boyfriend, of patient father figure. He had attended Lily's kindergarten performances, had taught her to ride a bicycle, had called himself her new daddy with what seemed like genuine affection. It had all been a lie. The murmurs grew louder. Emma caught fragments of conversation from the pews. "Embarrassing. Poor thing. I knew something was off about him. Where's his family?" The last question struck her as strange. She glanced toward the section where Michael's relatives should have been sitting. The pews were empty except for 3 people she didn't recognize. Older couples, well-dressed, who seemed more interested in their phones than in the ceremony that was rapidly falling apart. Rebecca squeezed her shoulder harder. "Emma, maybe we should call him again. We've called 17 times. Emma's voice cracked. "He's not answering because he's not coming." The cathedral door creaked open. Emma's heart leaped with desperate hope, but it was only her best friend Jennifer slipping back inside. Jennifer's face was pale, her expression stricken. She hurried to the altar and pressed a folded piece of paper into Emma's hand. "Michael left this with his brother," she whispered. "Emma, I'm so sorry." Emma didn't need to read it. The weight of the paper in her hand confirmed everything. 3 years of struggling as a single mother, working double shifts at the diner while taking night classes at the community college, finally meeting someone who seemed to accept both her and her daughter, all of it had led to this moment of absolute devastation. The first tear broke free, carving a hot path down her cheek and taking a streak of carefully applied makeup with it. She had saved for 2 months to afford that makeup artist, wanting to look beautiful just this once. "I need to get Lily," Emma managed to say. "I can't let her see me like this." As she turned toward her daughter, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the cathedral swung open with such force that they slammed against the interior walls. The sound reverberated through the vaulted ceiling like a gunshot. Every head turned. The whispers died instantly. He entered alone at first, though Emma could see the shadows of other men behind him in the bright doorway. Tall, perhaps 6'3", with the build of someone who maintained physical perfection as a matter of survival rather than vanity. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely that it might have been painted onto his frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes so dark they appeared black in the cathedral's dim light. He was handsome, in the way dangerous things often are, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Emma had never seen him before. She was certain of that. Yet, something about him struck a chord of vague recognition, like a face half remembered from a dream or a photograph glimpsed in passing. The stranger's presence commanded the cathedral as he strode down the aisle with purposeful, measured steps. Behind him, more men filed in, all dressed in similar dark suits, all moving with the same controlled precision. They positioned themselves along the walls and near the exits, not threateningly, but with the clear authority of people accustomed to controlling spaces and situations. Time seemed to stretch as he approached. Emma became acutely aware of her smeared makeup, of the ill-fitting dress that gaped at the waist and pulled too tight across the chest, of her complete exposure in this moment of abandonment. Shame burned through her like acid, but she couldn't look away from him. His gaze fixed on her with such intensity that she felt pinned in place, unable to move or speak. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne mixed with something else, something sharp and masculine that made every instinct in her body scream danger. Emma Lawson. His voice was low, resonant, with the barest of an accent she couldn't identify, Eastern European perhaps, but softened by years in America. Emma managed a nod, her fingers tightening around the wilting bouquet, as if it could somehow shield her from whatever was about to happen. "My name is Alexander Volkov." He said it as though she should recognize it, his brow furrowing slightly when her expression remained blank. "You don't know who I am." It wasn't a question, but Emma shook her head anyway. The name meant nothing to her. It should have. In the criminal underworld that operated in the shadows of their city, the name Volkov carried weight. But Emma's world had been too small, too consumed with survival and motherhood, to include knowledge of organized crime hierarchies. Alexander's dark eyes flicked to the empty space where Michael should have been standing, then back to her face. "Your fiancé isn't coming." "I know," Emma whispered, humiliation burning fresh at having the stranger witness her rejection. Alexander's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "He worked for me. Indirectly, he owed me a significant debt." The cathedral had fallen completely silent. Even Lily had stopped humming, watching the exchange with wide, curious eyes. Emma felt Rebecca tense beside her, protective instincts warring with fear. "I don't understand," Emma said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What does Michael's debt have to do with me?" "He believed marrying you would complicate his ability to repay what he owes," Alexander said, his tone matter-of-fact but edged with contempt. "He was wrong. His debt remains, and his absence today has merely transferred the consequences." The implication hung in the air like a blade. Michael had abandoned her not just because of Lily, but because of money. Because marrying her would have made him more vulnerable to whatever leverage this man held over him. The calculation, the coldness of it made Emma's stomach turn. "Who are you?" she asked, though dread was already forming an answer in the pit of her stomach. "Someone who collects what he's owed," Alexander replied simply. His gaze swept over the confused, frightened faces of the guests. "Your fiancé stole from me. Did you know that?" "No," Emma said immediately. "I had nothing to do with whatever Michael did." "I know." His expression softened fractionally, which somehow made him more unsettling rather than less. "You're collateral damage in his escape plan. He never intended to marry you. He needed a respectable cover, a family man facade, while he prepared to disappear with my money." Each word was a fresh crack in the fragile structure Emma had built around her relationship with Michael. Had any of it been real? His affection for Lily, his promises of stability and family, his declarations of love, or had she been nothing more than a convenient prop in a criminal's desperate scheme? "Mommy!" Lily's small voice cut through Emma's spiraling thoughts. The little girl had slipped from the pew and approached the altar, her flower crown sitting askew on her blonde curls. "Where's Michael? Is the wedding canceled?" Before Emma could answer, Alexander did something unexpected. He knelt down to Lily's level, his movement fluid and surprisingly gentle for such an imposing man. The suited men positioned around the cathedral tensed visibly, hands moving toward their jackets, but they held their positions. "Hello, little one," Alexander said, his voice transformed, still deep and authoritative, but softer, warmer. "What's your name?" "I'm Lily. I'm 5. She held up 5 fingers, displaying them proudly. "Are you a friend of Michael's?" Something dark flickered across Alexander's face. "No, I'm not Michael's friend." Lily considered this with the solemn gravity that only small children can muster. "Is that why he's not here? Because he's afraid of you?" A surprised laugh escaped Alexander, rich and genuine. It transformed his severe features for a moment, revealing a dimple in his left cheek and lines around his eyes that suggested he didn't laugh often, but that when he did, it was real. "Yes, little one, that's exactly why." He stood again, his attention returning to Emma. The debt must be paid, one way or another. Fear gripped Emma's throat. "I don't have any money. I barely make enough to feed us. I work 2 jobs and I still can't afford Lily's asthma medication half the time. I can't pay Michael's debts." "I know your financial situation," Alexander interrupted, and the casual revelation that he had investigated her personal life made Emma's skin crawl. "I'm not interested in what little savings you have. The $347 in your checking account won't even cover the interest on what he owes." "Then what do you want?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, terrified of the answer. Alexander glanced at Lily, then at the confused faces of Emma's family and friends, before returning his gaze to her. His next words sent a shockwave through the cathedral. "We should discuss this privately." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Emma said, finding courage in Lily's small presence beside her. "Whatever you want from me, you can say it here." Alexander raised one eyebrow, the gesture somehow both elegant and threatening. "Very well. Your fiancé has stolen $2 million from me. He has fled the country with my money, leaving you to face the consequences. That makes you the only available collateral I can claim." Gasps rippled through the gathered guests. Rebecca stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "You can't be serious. She didn't do anything. This isn't the Middle Ages. You can't just claim people as payment for debts." Alexander didn't even glance at her. His eyes remained fixed on Emma with that unsettling intensity. "I have a proposition for you, Emma Lawson. One that will settle the debt and ensure your daughter's future." "What proposition?" Emma asked, though every instinct screamed that she didn't want to know. His answer changed everything. "Marry me instead." The bouquet slipped from Emma's fingers, white rose petals scattered across the polished marble floor, drifting like snow. The cathedral erupted in shocked murmurs, but Emma heard none of it. Her ears were ringing, her vision narrowing to Alexander's face as her brain struggled to process what he had just said. "What?" she breathed, certain she had misheard. "Your fiancé refused to marry you," Alexander said, each word precise and deliberate. "So I'm offering to take his place. Right now. The priest is here. The guests are assembled. It would be a shame to waste the opportunity." "That's insane," Emma managed to say. "I don't even know you." "You knew Michael for what? A year? And look how that ended. At least with me, you'll know exactly what you're getting. Security, protection, a future for your daughter. In return, the debt is erased. And if I refuse?" The question came out steadier than Emma felt. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. The veneer of civility cracked just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "Then I will collect what I'm owed, through other means. Michael has family. They have assets." The threat was clear and utterly cold. Emma thought of Michael's elderly parents, who weren't even at the wedding, who had no idea their son had become a thief. You would hurt innocent people over money?
"Business is business," Alexander said simply. "I don't make exceptions, but I prefer elegant solutions to messy ones. This is elegant. You get security and stability. I get what I'm owed. Everyone wins except the man who deserves to lose." "This is ridiculous," Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was trapped, and she knew it. "I can't just marry a complete stranger because another man left me." "Not a stranger," Alexander corrected. "Alexander Volkov. And as I said, this isn't merely about the debt. I've had my eye on you for some time, Emma Lawson." The revelation sent ice down her spine. What does that mean? Instead of answering directly, Alexander glanced at his watch. an expensive piece that probably cost more than Emma made in a year. You have a decision to make. The debt must be settled today, one way or another. Choose now. Mommy, Lily tugged at Emma's hand, her voice small and confused. Are we still having a party? You said there would be cake. Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at the little girl. There will definitely be cake, little one. Your mother and I just need to finish our conversation. Don't make promises to my child, Emma said sharply, finding anger beneath the fear. His eyes met hers with what looked like approval. Fire. Good. You'll need that in my world. Before Emma could respond, Rebecca pulled her aside, gripping her arms tightly. Emma, you can't seriously be considering this. The man is clearly dangerous. I don't have a choice, Rebecca. Emma's voice was barely audible. You heard him. If I refuse, he'll go after Michael's family. They're innocent in this. So are you. Look at his men, Emma whispered urgently, nodding toward the suited figures stationed throughout the cathedral. Do you think the local police can protect us from whatever this is? And besides, Michael did steal from him. That much is probably true, Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. But marriage, Emma? You don't know anything about this man, what he'll expect from you. Emma looked at Lily, who had wandered back to examine the scattered rose petals with childlike fascination. I know he could destroy us if I refuse, and I know he could provide for Lily in ways I never could on my own. 3 years of crushing poverty, of choosing between groceries and electricity, of watching Lily go without because Emma simply couldn't afford the basics. It all pressed down on her in that moment with suffocating weight. Just think about what you're doing, Rebecca pleaded. There has to be another way. But as Emma turned back to Alexander, seeing him stand calmly amid the chaos he had created, she wasn't sure there was. She straightened her shoulders, squared her jaw, and walked back to face him. I have conditions, she said, her voice firmer than before. Alexander raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing at the edges of his mouth. I'm listening. Lily comes first, always. Her well-being, her happiness, her future. Those are non-negotiable. Agreed, he said without hesitation. I want to finish my degree. I've put it off too long, and I won't be dependent on anyone ever again. Of course, Alexander replied. I insist on it. Education is valuable. The ready acceptance threw Emma off balance. And I want to know what you do. The truth. No more secrets or surprises. If I'm doing this, I need to know what world I'm stepping into, whether we're going to be safe. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to weigh and measure something only he could see. Finally, he inclined his head slightly. You deserve that much. We'll discuss it, not here, but soon. One more thing, Emma said, gathering the last of her courage. This may be an arrangement, but if we're going to be married, I won't be treated like property. I expect respect. Something like genuine admiration flickered in his eyes. I would expect nothing less from the woman I choose as my wife. Do we have a deal, Emma Lawson? He extended his hand toward her, strong, well-manicured, with a fen scar running across the knuckles. This hand could protect them or destroy them. This decision could save them or doom them. But looking at Lily, at her innocent face and her future that stretched ahead, uncertain and frightening, Emma knew she didn't really have a choice at all. Yes, she said, placing her trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and surprisingly gentle. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, a current of awareness that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the undeniable magnetism of the man standing before her. Excellent, Alexander said softly. Then turning to Father Matthews, who had watched the entire exchange with barely concealed shock, he added, Father, we are ready to proceed with the ceremony. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a fever dream. The whispers from the pews grew to a steady murmur as Alexander's men efficiently reorganized the space, moving Michael's absent family members aside and making room for the impromptu ceremony. Emma's small family cluster, just Rebecca, her elderly Aunt Margaret, and 2 cousins, huddled together in visible shock as Emma took her place at the altar beside a man whose full name she had learned less than an hour ago. Lily, delighted that the wedding was happening after all, skipped back up the aisle, scattering her flower petals with renewed enthusiasm. When she reached the altar, Alexander surprised Emma again by kneeling to the little girl's level. "May I have your permission to marry your mother?" he asked with perfect seriousness. Lily tilted her head, studying him with the direct, unfiltered assessment of childhood. "Will you make her cry like Michael did?" A shadow passed over Alexander's features. "No, little one, I won't make her cry." "Promise?" Lily pressed, her small face grave. "I promise," Alexander said, and Emma was startled by the sincerity in his voice. Satisfied, Lily nodded. "Okay, but you have to come to my tea parties. Michael never did." A genuine smile transformed Alexander's face, softening the hard edges and revealing unexpected warmth. "It would be my honor to attend your tea parties." Emma felt something shift in her chest at the exchange. This dangerous man, this criminal who had essentially blackmailed her into marriage, was negotiating tea party attendance with her 5-year-old daughter. The contradiction was impossible to reconcile. The ceremony itself was brief and surreal. Emma spoke her vows in a voice that sounded distant to her own ears, promising to honor and cherish a man she had met less than an hour ago. When Alexander spoke his vows, however, his voice rang clear and confident through the cathedral, as if he were making promises he fully intended to keep. The ring he produced, delivered by one of his men who seemed to materialize from nowhere, was a simple platinum band with a single, flawless diamond. It slipped onto Emma's finger with surprising ease. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Matthews declared, his voice tinged with bewilderment. "You may kiss the bride." Emma froze. Somehow, in the whirlwind of the past hour, she hadn't considered this inevitable moment. Alexander's dark eyes met hers, a question in them, despite his commanding presence. He was waiting for permission. With the slightest nod, Emma consented. His hand rose to cup her cheek, surprisingly gentle for someone who radiated such controlled power. Then his lips touched hers, light at first, a mere brush of contact that somehow sent a shiver down her spine. The kiss deepened slightly, his mouth firm and sure on hers, before he pulled away. It lasted only seconds, yet Emma felt oddly breathless. "Mrs. Volkov," he said softly, his accent wrapping around the name in a way that made it sound almost precious. Reality crashed back as scattered applause echoed awkwardly through the cathedral, mostly from Alexander's men following some predetermined protocol. Rebecca stood rigid with shock. Lily clapped delightedly, unaware of the gravity of what had just transpired. Emma had just married a man she didn't know, whose business was admittedly criminal, who had essentially coerced her at the altar where she had just been abandoned. Yet, as he offered his arm and they processed down the aisle together, Emma felt something unexpected beneath the fear and confusion. A strange sense that perhaps, in the strangest possible way, she had just been saved rather than trapped. Outside the cathedral, a line of black SUVs with tinted windows waited at the curb. The lead vehicle was clearly luxury, longer than the others, gleaming in the autumn sunlight. A driver stepped forward to open the door, his movements crisp and professional. "Your car wasn't suitable," Alexander explained, noting Emma's confusion. "I took the liberty of arranging proper transportation." The interior was cream leather and smelled of new car and that same subtle cologne Emma had detected on Alexander. Lily scrambled in excitedly, immediately pressing buttons on the armrest until colored lights illuminated the ceiling. "Cool!" she exclaimed, her face transformed with delight. Alexander helped Emma into the vehicle, his hand steady at the small of her back. She sank into the soft leather, her legs suddenly unable to support her, as the full weight of what she had done crashed down. She had married a stranger, a dangerous man with bodyguards and unnamed criminal enterprises. a man who had admitted to watching her for months, a man who had essentially blackmailed her into marriage at the altar where she had just been abandoned by the man she thought she loved. And yet, as Alexander slid in beside her, his presence somehow both commanding and oddly comforting, Emma couldn't ignore a treacherous thought. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't alone. For better or worse, she now had protection, resources, a partner, however unconventional. The question was whether she had escaped one trap only to fall into another far more dangerous one. The vehicle glided through streets Emma had known her entire life, yet everything looked different through tinted windows from the back of a luxury SUV. They passed the diner where she had served coffee and pancakes for 3 years, where regulars knew her name and left dollar tips they could barely afford. They passed the community college where her evening classes had represented hope, a way out, a future built brick by brick through exhaustion and determination. All of it receded behind them like a dream dissolving in morning light. Lily pressed her nose against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she pointed at familiar landmarks with childlike wonder, as if seeing them from this new vantage point. Alexander sat beside Emma, his posture relaxed but alert, like a predator at rest who never truly stopped watching his surroundings. One of his men occupied the front passenger seat, speaking quietly into a phone in what sounded like Russian. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror periodically, not watching the road behind them, but monitoring Alexander, awaiting instructions that never came. Emma's hands trembled in her lap. She clasped them together, trying to still the visible evidence of her fear, but the platinum band on her finger caught the light and seemed to mock her with its weight. Mrs. Volkov. The name felt foreign, impossible, like a costume she had been forced to wear without understanding the role it required her to play. "You're afraid," Alexander observed quietly. It wasn't a question. His dark eyes had been tracking her every micro-expression, reading her the way someone reads a book written in a familiar language. "Of course I'm afraid," Emma replied, her voice low enough that Lily wouldn't hear over her excited narration of the passing scenery. "I just married a man who threatened innocent people to get what he wanted, a man who admits to criminal activity, a man whose full name I learned an hour ago." Alexander considered this, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "Fair enough, but consider what I didn't do. I didn't force you. I offered you a choice, however unpleasant the alternatives were. I didn't threaten you or your daughter. And I kept my word about Michael's family. They'll never know about his theft or his debts." "That's supposed to reassure me?" Emma asked, incredulous. "That you're a criminal with standards?" A slight smile touched his lips, transforming the harsh lines of his face into something almost approachable. "Exactly that, yes. In my world, standards are the difference between a businessman and a monster. I am the former, Emma. I hope in time you'll see that." Before Emma could respond, Lily turned from the window with sudden intensity. "Are we going to your house?" she asked Alexander, with the directness of a child who hadn't yet learned that some questions made adults uncomfortable. "Is it big? Do you have a dog? Michael said he was allergic to dogs, but I think he just didn't want one." At the mention of Michael, Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We're going to our house now," he corrected gently, emphasizing the possessive in a way that made Emma's stomach flip. "Yes, it's big. And no, I don't have a dog, but if you'd like one, we can discuss it."
Lily's eyes went wide with wonder. "Really? Any kind?" Emma couldn't help but interject, her protective instinct flaring. "Alexander, you can't just promise her things like that. We need to discuss major decisions together." He turned those dark, unreadable eyes on her, and Emma saw something flicker in their depths. Approval, perhaps. "You are right. I apologize. Lily, what I meant to say is that your mother and I will discuss the possibility of a dog, and if she agrees, we'll see what we can arrange." Lily seemed satisfied with this diplomatic answer, returning her attention to the window. But Emma felt the weight of what had just occurred. He had deferred to her authority as a mother, publicly acknowledged her role in decision-making. It was a small thing, perhaps, but in the context of a man who clearly expected obedience from everyone around him, it felt significant. The city gradually gave way to suburbs, which in turn yielded to something beyond Emma's experience: estates. Properties measured in acres rather than square feet, hidden behind stone walls and iron gates, where wealth wasn't just displayed, but assumed. The USV turned onto a private road, trees forming a canopy overhead that filtered the afternoon sunlight into patterns of gold and shadow. At the end of the drive, gates swung open automatically, ornate ironwork spelling out a stylized V that needed no further explanation. Emma's breath caught. The house, if it could be called something so modest as a house, rose before them like something from a magazine she would never have been able to afford. 3 stories of pale stone and elegant architecture, with tall windows that reflected the sky, and grounds that stretched beyond what she could see from the driveway. Gardens flanked the approach, still blooming despite the October chill, maintained with a precision that spoke of professional care and unlimited resources. "This is where you live?" The question escaped Emma before she could stop it, her tone betraying her shock. "This is where we live now," Alexander corrected, watching her reaction with what might have been amusement. The vehicle stopped before a grand entrance, where wide stone steps led to double doors of dark wood. Before anyone could move, those doors opened and a woman emerged. Late 50s, Emma guessed, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and the bearing of someone accustomed to managing complex households. She wore a simple gray dress that somehow managed to look both professional and expensive, and her expression was carefully neutral as she descended the steps. Alexander exited first, moving with that same fluid grace that seemed at odds with his size, and offered his hand to help Emma from the vehicle. She took it because refusing seemed petty, but the contact sent that same strange current through her that she had felt during their kiss. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not constraining, and he held her fingers a moment longer than strictly necessary before releasing them. Lily bounded out after her mother, her flower girl dress already showing signs of the long day, the hem dusty and one ribbon coming loose. She stopped at the base of the steps, tilting her head back to take in the full scope of the house, her mouth forming a perfect O of amazement. "Mrs. Volkov," the silver-haired woman said, addressing Emma with a slight bow of her head that felt more like respect than subservience. "Welcome home. My name is Maria Rostova. I manage the household. Mr. Volkov asked me to ensure everything was prepared for your arrival." Emma opened her mouth to correct the woman, to explain that she wasn't really Mrs. Volkov, that this was all a terrible mistake born of blackmail and desperation, but the words died in her throat, because legally, socially, in every way that mattered, she was Mrs. Volkov now. That was the choice she had made, standing at that altar with her wilted roses and her humiliation when she had placed her hand in Alexander's and sealed their bizarre agreement. "Thank you," Emma managed, her voice sounding thin and uncertain to her own ears. "This is my daughter, Lily." Maria's expression softened as she looked at the little girl. "Welcome, Miss Lily. I have prepared a room especially for you. Would you like to see it?" Lily glanced at Emma, seeking permission, and Emma nodded despite her own uncertainty about everything unfolding around them. Maria extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lily took it. As the housekeeper led her daughter up the steps and through the impressive doors, Emma felt a spite of panic. She was being separated from Lily, the one constant in her chaotic life, the reason she had made this impossible choice. "She won't be out of your sight for long," Alexander said quietly, reading her distress with unsettling accuracy. "Maria is simply showing her to her room and helping her settle. You'll join them shortly. But first, you and I need to talk." The panic sharpened into something closer to fear. About what? "About the terms of our arrangement," Alexander said, gesturing toward a stone path that curved around the side of the house. Walk with me." It wasn't really a request, though he phrased it politely enough. Emma fell into step beside him, acutely aware of her borrowed wedding dress, now wrinkled and stained at the hem from the cathedral floor, and her cheap shoes that pinched her feet. She felt like an imposter in this world of manicured gardens and old money, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks playing dress-up in a life that didn't belong to her. The path led to a garden more elaborate than the ones fronting the house. Roses and impossible autumn bloom, hedges trimmed into precise geometric shapes, a fountain at the center where water cascaded over smooth stone with a sound that should have been soothing, but only made Emma more nervous. Stone benches positioned at intervals offered places to sit and contemplate beauty that Emma had never imagined experiencing in person. Alexander stopped beside the fountain, his hands sliding into his pockets in a gesture that made him seem almost human rather than the dangerous force of nature he had proven himself to be. "Emma," he began, and the use of her first name in that accent sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "I want you to understand what happened today, what you agreed to." "You blackmailed me," Emma said bluntly. "You threatened Michael's innocent family unless I married you. I understand perfectly what happened." "Do you?" Alexander's dark eyes fixed on her with that unnerving intensity. "Because I don't think you do. Not fully. Let me be clear about something. Michael's family was never in danger." The words hit Emma like cold water. "What?" "They were never in danger," Alexander repeated calmly. "I don't make war on the uninvolved. I don't punish the innocent for the crimes of their relatives. That's not how I operate." "But you said—" Emma's voice trailed off as understanding dawned, cold and heavy in her stomach. "You lied. You manipulated me." "I gave you motivation to make the choice I wanted you to make," Alexander corrected, his tone matter-of-fact. "There's a difference." Emma's hands clenched into fists at her sides, rage and helplessness warring inside her. "So this was all a game? You coerced me into marriage based on a lie?"
"Not entirely a lie," he said. "Michael did steal from me. $2 million. As I said, he did flee the country. Those facts are true. And his debt does need to be settled. But I would have collected from Michael alone, not his elderly parents." "Then why?" Emma demanded, her voice rising despite her best efforts to maintain composure. "Why the threats? Why force me into this marriage if you didn't actually need me to settle his debt?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving past her to the gardens beyond, as if choosing his words with unusual care. "Because I wanted you." The simple declaration should have been romantic. In any other context, from any other man, it might have been flattering. But here, now, from this dangerous stranger who had upended her entire life, it was terrifying. "You don't even know me," Emma protested. "You can't want someone you don't know." "But I do know you," Alexander countered, his attention returning to her with renewed focus. "I've been watching you for 6 months, Emma. I know you work 2 jobs to support your daughter. I know you take night classes despite being exhausted. I know you volunteer at Lily's school even though you can barely afford the gas to get there. I know you're strong, resourceful, and fiercely protective of the people you love." The revelation that he had been surveilling her for half a year made Emma's skin crawl. That's not knowing someone, that's stalking. "Call it what you want," Alexander said with a slight shrug. "In my world, due diligence is survival. I don't make investments without research. I don't commit to people without understanding them. And I committed to you 6 months ago, Emma. Today was simply the first time you became aware of it." "This is insane," Emma said, taking a step back from him. "You're insane. You can't just decide you want someone and manipulate them into marriage. That's not how normal people operate." "I'm not normal people," Alexander replied simply. "I'm a man who sees what he wants and takes it. But make no mistake, I didn't take you against your will. You chose this. You put your hand in mine. You spoke your vows. The circumstances were unconventional, but the choice was yours."
"Choice," Emma repeated bitterly. "You call that a choice when the alternative was watching innocent people suffer?" "The alternative was never real, as I've explained, but you didn't know that. You made the choice you thought was right, the noble one, the one that protected others at cost to yourself. That's exactly the kind of woman I wanted as my wife." Emma stared at him, trying to reconcile the man before her with the words he was speaking. He had manipulated her, lied to her, coerced her, and yet he spoke of wanting her with something that sounded almost like admiration. The contradiction was impossible to process. "I don't understand you," she finally said. "I don't understand any of this." "You will," Alexander promised, "in time. But for now, you need to understand the arrangement we've entered into, the reality of what being my wife means." "I'm listening," Emma said, though every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Lily and disappear into whatever life they could scrape together. But she had nowhere to run to, no resources to disappear with, and a daughter who needed stability more than Emma needed her pride. Alexander moved closer, not threateningly, but with purpose, until Emma had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "First," he said, "you and Lily are under my protection now. That means no one touches you, threatens you, or causes you harm without answering to me. In my world, that protection is absolute. You're safer now than you've ever been in your life." "Second," Emma continued, because the pause suggested he expected acknowledgement. "Second, this house is your home, not my house where you're a guest, your home. You have access to everything, authority over the household staff, and the freedom to make it comfortable for yourself and Lily. Maria answers to you now as much as to me." "Third," Emma prompted when he paused again. "Third," Alexander said, and something shifted in his expression, a hint of vulnerability breaking through the carefully maintained control. "This marriage is real, Emma. Not in the traditional sense, not yet, but real in the ways that matter. I expect loyalty, partnership, and eventually affection. I won't force intimacy on you. When and if that happens, it will be because you want it too. But I expect you to try, to give this arrangement a genuine chance rather than simply counting the days until you can escape." "And if I can't?" Emma asked quietly. "If I can't develop affection for a man who lied to me, manipulated me, and commits to being a criminal?" Alexander's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Then we'll have a comfortable but cold marriage, which would be disappointing, but not unprecedented. But I think you're stronger than that. I think you're capable of seeing past the circumstances of how we came together to what we might build together." "You have a lot of faith in someone you admit to stalking," Emma said, with bitter humor. "I have faith in what I've observed, Emma. You're a survivor. You've spent 5 years doing whatever it took to provide for your daughter. You've sacrificed, struggled, and persevered. That strength doesn't disappear just because your circumstances have changed. You'll adapt to this life just as you adapted to single motherhood and poverty. And eventually, you might even find that this arrangement offers you more than you expected." Before Emma could respond, Lily's voice carried across the garden, high and excited. "Mommy, Mommy, come see my room. It has a princess bed and everything." Emma turned to see her daughter racing down the path, Maria following at a more sedate pace behind her. Lily crashed into Emma's legs, wrapping her small arms around her mother's waist with the uncomplicated affection of childhood. "It's so pretty, Mommy. There are books and toys, and the bed has curtains that actually close. Can we really stay here?" "Yes, sweetheart," Emma said, smoothing Lily's tangled hair back from her face. "This is our home now." Lily pulled back to look up at Alexander, her expression suddenly serious. "Are you going to be my new daddy, like Michael was supposed to be?" The question hung in the garden air like a physical thing. Emma held her breath, uncertain how this dangerous man would respond to such innocent directness. Alexander knelt down again, bringing himself to Lily's eye level with that surprising gentleness he seemed to reserve specifically for her daughter. "I'd like to be," he said carefully, "if that's something you'd want. But I understand if you need time to get to know me first. I'm a stranger to you right now. That's okay. Michael said he wanted to be my daddy, but then he left. Are you going to leave too?" "No," Alexander said firmly, and Emma heard absolute conviction in that single word. "I'm not going anywhere, little one. I made a promise to your mother today, and I keep my promises. Always."
Lily studied him with the intense scrutiny that only children possess, as if she could see through pretense and polish to the truth beneath. Finally, she nodded, satisfied with whatever she had found in his face. "Okay, can I call you Alex? Alexander is really long." A genuine smile transformed his features. "You can call me Alex. And you'll really come to my tea parties, even though you're a grown-up, and grown-ups usually think tea parties are boring?" "Especially because I'm a grown-up, Alexander," Alex assured her. "The most important tea parties need grown-ups to make them official." Satisfied, Lily grabbed his hand with the casual trust of a child who hadn't yet learned that trust could be dangerous. "Come on, I want to show Mommy my room. You have to see it, Mommy. There's even a dollhouse bigger than me." As Lily towed Alexander back toward the house, chattering about all the wonders she had discovered in the past 20 minutes, Emma followed behind them with Maria at her side. The housekeeper's expression was warm, almost maternal, as she watched the little girl's excitement. "She's a lovely child," Maria observed quietly. Mr. Volkov was very specific about her room. He wanted everything perfect. "How long did he have to prepare?" Emma asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "How long has he been planning this?" Maria's expression became carefully neutral. "I couldn't say, Mrs. Volkov, but Mr. Volkov is a man who plans thoroughly when something matters to him." They entered the house through a side entrance, and Emma found herself in a hallway that could have housed her entire apartment. Marble floors, artwork on the walls that looked expensive even to her untrained eye, and lighting that seemed designed to make everything glow with warm elegance. Lily pulled Alexander up a curved staircase, her small feet pattering on the stone steps, her voice echoing off the high ceilings as she described each new discovery. The bedroom Maria had prepared for Lily was indeed fit for a princess. Pale pink walls, gauzy white curtains that framed windows overlooking the gardens, and a bed that looked like something from a fairy tale, complete with a canopy and curtains that could be drawn closed to create a private sanctuary. Shelves lined one wall, already stocked with books and toys that must have cost more than Emma made in a month. A dollhouse stood in one corner, 3 stories tall and furnished with miniature perfection. "Do you like it?" Alexander asked, watching Lily spin in circles with her arms outstretched, her face glowing with delight. "I love it," Lily declared. "It's the best room ever." "Good," Alexander said, and Emma heard genuine satisfaction in his voice. "This is your space, Lily, your kingdom. You can arrange it however you want." Lily threw her arms around his legs in an impulsive hug that seemed to surprise him. "Thank you, Alex. You're nice." Emma's throat tightened at the simple declaration. Lily had been deprived of so much, had grown up in a cramped apartment with secondhand furniture and toys from thrift stores, and now she was being given everything a child could want. Part of Emma resented Alexander for buying her daughter's affection. Another part, the exhausted mother who had struggled for 5 years to provide even the basics, felt overwhelming gratitude. "Your room is next door," Maria said to Emma, gesturing toward a connecting door, "so you're close if Lily needs you in the night." Emma hadn't even considered her own sleeping arrangements. The thought had been lost in the chaos of everything else, but now it crashed down on her with uncomfortable weight. She was married. Married people typically shared a bedroom. The thought of sharing a bed with Alexander Volkov, of the intimacy that might be expected, made her stomach flip with a mixture of fear and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. Alexander caught her expression and his own darkened slightly. "Let me show you," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He led her through the connecting door into a suite that made Lily's room look modest by comparison. A sitting area with a fireplace, a bedroom with a massive four-poster bed, a bathroom visible through an open door that appeared to be larger than Emma's old apartment's living room. Everything was decorated in soft blues and creams, elegant but not ostentatious, feminine but not aggressively so. "This is your space," Alexander said, watching her take it in. "The door locks from the inside. No one, including me, will enter without your permission." Emma turned to him, confusion evident on her face. "But we're married. Don't you expect—" "Emma," Alexander interrupted gently, "intimacy happens when you want it, not before. I have my own rooms on the 3rd floor. You have your privacy here. When and if you decide you want more from this marriage, you know where to find me." The relief was almost painful. Emma had been steeling herself for expectations she wasn't ready to meet, and she was being given space and choice. It didn't erase the manipulation that had brought her here, but it complicated her feelings about the man standing before her. "Why?" Emma asked. "You went to all this trouble to force me into marriage, but you're not gonna—" "Because consent matters," Alexander said firmly. "Because I want a wife, not a possession. Because when you come to me, Emma, I want it to be because you desire it, not because you feel obligated." His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Don't be so sure," Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm always sure," Alexander replied with a slight smile. "It's one of my more irritating qualities. You'll learn them all in time." There was a knock on the door and Maria appeared with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Volkov, you have a call. It's urgent." Something hardened in Alexander's face, the brief glimpse of humanity vanishing behind his professional mask. "I'll take it in my office. Emma, make yourself comfortable. Maria will help you with anything you need." He paused at the door, turning back to look at her. "We'll have dinner together, 7 o'clock. All 3 of us. It's important that we start as we mean to continue, as a family." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving Emma alone in a bedroom that belonged to a stranger wearing her face. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her borrowed wedding dress rustling around her, and finally let the tears come, silent, angry tears, that she wiped away quickly because she refused to let Lily see her cry. This was her life now. Mrs. Emma Volkov, wife to a man she didn't know, mother to a child who was already falling in love with the gilded cage he had built for them. And the most terrifying part was the tiny voice in the back of Emma's mind, whispering that maybe, just maybe, this cage might actually set her free.